We will start with the development trends and investment. Maybe you would like to touch base on that, Dami?
Okay. So from the perspective of Marriott, which is a global hotel operator, what we're seeing in terms of new trends that are happening in the industry is we're seeing more mid-scale and upscale hotel projects being developed as opposed to luxury brands, particularly in West African markets. Traditionally, we'd have wanted to come in with a flagship brand, with our Marriott flagship brand or a five-star brand, but we're seeing more upscale brands like the Four Points, which has turned out to be a great brand for these markets because it's more flexible, and so that's helping us grow our pipeline faster. We're seeing the growth of lifestyle brands, and that's primarily been driven by customer tastes and shifting trends, people wanting more holistic experiences when they're traveling. So we're seeing the growth of wellness in the hotel and travel industry, and that's influencing the brands that we're also pushing into markets. The youthful exuberance of brands like Moxie that we've just introduced. That's a great brand that works at the upper mid-scale level. It's quite boutique, quite lifestyle, so that works in being trendy, but also being more cost-effective for the owners and also appealing to the demand.
So basically, what you're saying is much easier to operate, and in terms of return on investment, it is more also interesting for investors and
Yes.
owners. Yeah.
Yes.
Deepo, would you like to touch base on that as well, regarding maybe in terms of trends in design and the shifts for the past couple of years and where we probably will be going?
Yeah, okay. I can obviously focus mainly on the Nigerian scene. I think clients now are becoming a little more savvy, in other words, the developers. In previous years, they thought a hotel was a hotel was a hotel. And given that, many clients tended to go for the upscale luxury market. Everybody wants to be associated with the name Hilton or Marriott, without a clear understanding that each of these brands do have a very wide range of hotel models that can be offered in the market. That was in the past. I mean, we have a project now where he was offered a Courtyard. Unfortunately, he decided he had to have a Marriott. They're very personal feelings. People want to be associated with the very top end of the market. I think now a bit of realism is creeping in. It does cost quite a lot to develop the high-end products. The high-end products can be very sensitive to fluctuations in the economy. Adjustments have been made in the last few years given the exchange rate alterations here, and people are realizing now that perhaps the mid-scale, the budget hotels can be just as profitable. And the other end thing we're seeing is the growth of mixed use. People want to combine perhaps residential with the standard hotel product. We've got a number where we're combining retail as well. And the actual commercial products that are being merged with hotels can be quite a wide range. I mean, we've got even things like commercial IT hubs being integrated with hotel products now. So I think the market is developing. I think the clients are now realizing that you've got to be very careful about developing hotels. We have in the market hotels that are on offer for sale, either because the funding was not structured properly. So I think by and large we are maturing here now, and I think we'll see the advent of quite a new range of hotels. I mean, you see the Legend at the airport. That's at least one offering that's new in the market. Okay.
So mixed use are becoming more and more interesting projects. Putting also maybe a brand in a service apartment might might increase the value even of the whole project, which can be interesting for the investor. Regarding the maybe the guest needs and behavior changes, Holger, would you like to maybe touch base on that, based on your experience as well as a developer?
Sure, thank you very much. So, what we are witnessing is an expansion of the hospitality beyond the core hospitality industry, as you would traditionally think about it. A few years back, it wouldn't have made sense to have me on this panel. I mean, whether it makes sense today is up to you to decide. But representing Clifton Homes, a residential developer, we are not the obvious first choice to be on a hospitality panel. But what two trends that we have not created, but that created an opportunity that we are seizing, have resulted in, is that we now see ourselves that we are operating inside the hospitality industry. Let me explain. We're seeing the need in West Africa to offer investment opportunities for people to create an income past their retirement. Pension schemes are not necessarily trusted. Government, private sector don't offer what people are looking for to put their money to create revenue for them to have an income even after retirement. That is the one thing. And on the other hand, online market platforms like Airbnb allow people to expand the reach of their property investment beyond the typical tenant, beyond the family or even the young professional that rents an apartment for a longer period of time. But Airbnb has allowed people, individuals, to come into or to let to people that come to a city for a night, for 3 nights, 2 weeks or a month. And this is now where we are meeting the hospitality industry, where we as residential developers selling to buy to let owners, then who realize the value of their investment through online platforms and thereby are starting to eat into what is the classical hospitality industry's realm, and that is the short-let traveler. So with this trend, I think we are just seeing the tip of the iceberg currently. Between May of last year and May of this year, so within the year, the Airbnb listings in Lagos alone have more than doubled, and there is no indication that this trend is stopping yet or anytime soon. So we see that these developments within the hospitality segment have direct effects also on the real estate industry as a whole. And as a developer operating in Ghana at the moment, we were able to seize on that opportunity and thereby, well, share the panel with you.
For Marriott as a company, we've actually seen this trend and studied how we can best enter into this space. So a couple years ago, we started a trial, a pilot program called Tribute Portfolio Homes. And we trialed that with a startup in this space called HostMaker. And, we use that opportunity to see what the guests want, to see what kind of guests we would want to cater to, what kind of offerings we can provide. And the result of that trial was earlier this year, we launched a new brand called Homes and Villas by Marriott International, where we, curate we highly curate these homes. They're managed by property managers, professional property managers, and then you also get the benefit of the loyalty program. So you're also part of the Bonvoy, you're getting your points, you're redeeming your points, which is a great advantage when you're playing in this space. So that's one way where we as a traditional hotel operator has identified this trend and found the best way to play in the space.
So basically, we can say that Airbnb is having a positive effect on home buyers and short-term holidays travelers, right? Patrick is not here regarding for the subject regarding the financing. However, financing is a key role in the hotel industry, and I wanted to discuss with you guys what was the effect really on financing in terms of if you are an architect or an operator. Maybe Deepo, if you want to touch base on that.
Yeah, I mean, if I put it one way, if we say design 10 hotels, the number that get built may not be more than 1 or 2. And the primary reason behind this is an inability to actually structure the funding. Hotel funding here needs to be longer term than most of our institutions are familiar with. When you develop an apartment, you can sell off plan. By the time you finish construction, most of the funding has been returned. That's not the case with hotel development. It's a much longer term investment. So you've got to structure in very different ways. Secondly, in Nigeria here, the actual cost of construction can be significantly higher than in other parts of Africa. I mean, if you compare with South Africa, at one point we were looking at almost double the cost. Obviously, that goes into the way in which we source products for the developments. In Nigeria here, we import most of the inputs that go into hotels. Now, I must say that this is changing. People have made significant investments over the last 2-3 years into actually producing some of the elements we require right here in Nigeria. In fact, I see there's one of the manufacturers here represented. I was a bit intrigued to see the quality of products that they're actually producing here now. So that situation's changing, but the actual structuring of the funding, people are used to very short-term returns in Nigeria. You invest in a product. By the time you finish construction, either the banks want their money back within 2-3 years, which just is not sustainable with a hotel product. So there are people like Afro-Exim who come into the picture, who can take over funding on a much longer term and far better interest rates. People are looking at offshore funding. Now that carries, again, risks in terms of the exchange risk that you carry, which has affected a number of hotels here. So it is a major, major problem. In fact, we really do need to structure perhaps a conference on how to fund hotels here, because it is a very specialized area we need to look at.
Dami, do you want to share your experience regarding the financing?
For us as hotel operators, we operate an asset-light model. So in terms of financing, there's very little we can contribute to a project in terms of the equity. What we can contribute is network, so opening up conversations with DFIs. Recently, the U.S. Development Finance Institution called OPIC just financed a project in Dakar, Senegal, to 64 million, which is 50% of the project cost. So there are some DFIs that are interested in these markets that, will look at projects on a project by project basis and determine, how much they'd be willing to give. But for us, it's a lot of education on, on the part of the owners. Make sure you're doing your due diligence. Make sure you have a, good understanding of the kind of returns that you would get from this investment, and also try to line up your financing well in advance of starting this, because once you start and then you have to stop, the cost just keeps getting higher and higher. And so for us, the impact, particularly in the last couple years, is just a stagnant pipeline in Nigeria and some other markets that have been impacted. So that's the impact. That's the major impact that we feel is our pipeline's not growing fast enough, and the hotel's not opening soon enough for us to operate.
So basically, it is very, very important
Yeah.
to. Yes, please.
If I might come in there, one significant development in the past, most operators do not get involved in financing the hotel product. That over the last couple of years is changing. In fact, a number of the operators have now decided to set up funds which can support hotel projects, particularly in Africa. A number of quite large funds have been announced in the last 12 months. Some actually target specifically projects that are ongoing but require perhaps completion funding. Some will target different types of products. But certainly there is money now available from the operator side. Obviously not all the operators, but who have decided that in order to float and assist projects here to get off the ground, perhaps they need to start putting in some money assistance. So that is happening now. So that's quite a significant development.
So to make sure that an investor has an efficient project, an efficient investment, it is very important to really do its due diligence and to set up its financing before even starting the project. So what you're saying is that it's changing now at the moment towards a positive.
We have on hotel projects is that people get part financing and start the project. And you'll notice that there are many projects that sort of stop a year or two and then continue, and some really get to a point where they're never completed. So it's very, very important that people understand that it's just not easy to assume that midway through somebody's going to come along and add another, a few $1 million to it. It's also important to recognize that there's a certain amount of equity funding that goes into supporting successful hotel projects. Yeah, it's not the case where you can just say the land alone is my equity, or you're going to put in 10% cash equity and the banks will do the rest. I know the IFC, I think, insist on a minimum of 40%. I'm not sure if they've raised it. It used to be 40%. But financing is the major bugbear of hotel structuring now. If we've looked at 50 projects, you only get maybe half a dozen getting off the ground, primarily because of this. So yeah, due diligence, a good feasibility study, a good market study. In Nigeria here, we tend to follow the trend. If someone builds a hotel nearby, we figure that's a new exciting thing, so we go and build a hotel. There are many being built without operators, in which case sometimes you have to go back and redesign the entire thing, which adds to the cost again.
Maybe we're going to move on the hotel business models. Hotels have different business models and that have been shifting over the past few years. Each continent has a specific characteristic. Maybe Dami, you would like to share with us what Marriott has experienced in the past and what are your thoughts for the future as well?
Okay, so for the West Africa region in particular, the strategy was to enter in with management agreements because we felt that was the better way to have more control over the hotel operations. So we'd sign management agreements with owners or developers and fully operate these hotels. We're now more open to coming in with franchise agreements where on that end, we just collect a license or a royalty fee, and the hotel can be operated by the owner or his or her appointed third-party operator. And so the opportunity that that creates in this market is for more third-party operators to, sort of come up and grow their portfolios of hotels that they operate, and also learn brand standards of international hotel operators. We have a couple third-party operators that we work with. We've recently signed a project in Cape Verde for 4 Points that's going to be a franchise agreement and operated by a third-party a management company out of Turkey. There's another company called Aleph, led by Bani Haddad. He has experience in Wyndham and a couple other hotel operators, and he started a third-party management company. We have a project signed with him in Liberia, and they're looking to grow their portfolio extensively in Africa. So this is an opportunity for operators in the industry that are local, that understand the market, to sort of increase their skills and capacity in managing, and we can start with our mid-scale, our upscale brands like 4 Points, Courtyard, and they learn how we look at operating hotels. And for us, it's a quicker way to grow our pipeline. In the US, 74% of our hotels in the portfolio in North America are franchise agreements as opposed to management, and that is the direction that we want to grow in the future.
So basically, in the past it was management contract. Now it's more franchise. So it's a franchise managed by a third party, right?
That is what we would like to do. So the franchise is essentially we manage for a few years and then we hand over to the owner. That is what we would want to achieve here.
So basically, for owners that are opting for this kind of business model, it is believed that it is more cost effective in terms of fees, and in terms of management. You have, like, let's say, a local company that is taking care of the operation. Is this something that you experience in your hotels franchised?
What's the question?
I was saying that the fee structure is more lighter for investors that are going to a franchise, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, particularly in the mid-scale to upscale segments, it's definitely more cost-effective to operate with a franchise. It's less heavy on expat payrolls and things like that. So it's an opportunity if we can grow more local third-party operators. It's certainly easier for us on our end in terms of growing the pipeline, and for the owner, it's less expensive than a management agreement, for sure.
So the key for investors here is really to adapt and to keep changing.
And what we see here with owners is they want more control on their investment and on the business of the hotel. And there's sometimes a friction between owners not understanding that if you hire an international hotel operator to manage your hotel, you kind of need to let them manage the hotel. And so with the franchise model, it gives the owner the control and the oversight on the hotel that they typically want in this part of the world.
Maybe we'll move on the next subtopic, which is the traveler's profile. We know that mainly West Africa is a corporate destination, but maybe with you, Holger, with the new initiative with Airbnb, you see more the leisure segment improving. Can you just give us an overview of how things are improving and how fast are improving in terms of leisure, maybe in Nigeria?
Well, from our experience, it is still a very heavily biased towards the corporate side. We see that a lot of international business, in my case in Ghana, in Accra, is done on a consultancy basis. A lot of companies don't have headquarters, certainly not in Ghana, a lot of times not in West Africa. So whatever business they do is based on short visits in sometimes mid to high frequency. So what we're seeing is that that international companies approach us repetitively to provide accommodation for their staff for a week, sometimes only a few days. Sometimes they come in numbers, so we rent a higher number of apartments to them that then they possibly share, and they come back because we, as also operators of our properties, even after we've have sold them to individual owners, are able to maintain a consistent quality, a consistent level of service. That is important for the corporate travelers, and this is still the biggest piece of the market. What we are in Ghana now experiencing as well is an increase on the individual, on the private traveler side, and that is it has always been a peak in the summer and especially in the winter when people return from the diaspora to reconnect to their families, to be not quite in the village, but at least in their country from where they can see their people. But the current administration, Nana Akufo-Addo, has started this Year of Return initiative. 2019 is supposed to be the 400th year of the first commercial slave trade into the Americas. And so with a lot of activities around that, we are seeing an influx of people that are coming to Ghana as tourists under this big umbrella of the Year of Return, and they also are considering hotels, but they are also being a lot of them from the UK or from the US, very used to Airbnb. This is their first way of sourcing accommodation for them, and then again they end up in our properties or in the properties that we manage. So I think it is still very much the corporate part where much of the money is, but with the increase in tourism that we are seeing, and that is projected to rise phenomenally between beginning of last year and 2030, we are expecting a more than 100% increase of tourists to West Africa. These are the latest numbers from Knight Frank. I think there is a lot of potential also on that side of the market.
With that observation. I think there is a potential for that diaspora travel to kind of boost our tourism. It's obviously corporate, business mass markets for the foreseeable future, but there is that growing segment of diaspora where, and I think there's a concerted efforts of West African governments trying to create a more enabling environment for, Africans in the US and Europe to kind of come back and connect with the culture. So Ghana, we're seeing over Christmas, for instance, demand has gone up so high that on Airbnb, by August, it was reporting that demand was 400% higher than normal, which is great for the market because, we're seeing the prices of these Airbnbs go up $400 sometimes. So that's something that I've also seen in other countries. Cote d'Ivoire, for instance, they're trying to promote tourism, and that's a segment that they want to grow. Togo, Benin Republic. If there is a good strategic and concerted effort to grow this market, that's something that could become really big in terms of growing leisure tourism into West Africa. And for real estate, what does that mean? We don't need 5-star hotels for that kind of market. We need good Aloft, Courtyard by Marriott, 4 Points by Sheraton type of brands that can cater to that demand going forward.
We'll move to the next topic, which is the overall performance of hotel investments. We take the example here of Nigeria, which is the most significant hotel market in West Africa. with more than 6,000 keys and a little bit more than 40 hotels. Half of them are branded, which is, the market needs more branded residences and international standards to shape, the industry. The Nigerian hotels also are considered the most valuable hotels in Africa mainland. They are ranked even third after Seychelles and Mauritius, they are considered as a very, very attractive investment. However, you need, as we discussed, we need to have the right product. It's not anymore only 5-star hotel. I mean, 4-star lifestyle hotels, branded service apartment with international service standards. So the product is very important. The financing as well. Without the financing, the project cannot be finalized. Maybe regarding Marriott, what are your market focus, and what do you think which market will be really promising for investors in West Africa?
So currently in West Africa, we operate 11 hotels. And in the pipeline, we have about 20 hotels, over 4,000 rooms for West Africa. And that would put us in a handful of countries. The strategy is obviously to grow our pipeline extensively in the region, get coverage in more countries. In terms of the brands that we're looking to deploy, Marriott has 30 brands now, and that doesn't include the homes and villas, which is kind of a standalone business. So there are 30 brands to deploy, and we're agnostic in terms of which brands we can deploy. It certainly depends on the market fit, the capacity of the investor, of the developer, and what works best for each project. But I think we could do, key 5-star brands, Marriott, Ritz-Carlton in cities like Lagos, Abuja, Accra. Obviously, we have one in Accra right now. In capital cities, we could do key flagship brands. And then as we grow in those cities and into the secondary cities, we can deploy our 4-star brands, our 4 Points by Sheraton brand, our Courtyard brand, lifestyle brands like Aloft, which I think is probably best described as a junior W hotel, which is a brand that I think could work here in terms of the boutique lifestyle element. So there's certainly a lot of brands that we can deploy, and we're open to doing what works for the market.
Dipo, just to also continue on the key competitive advantage for an investment in the future, taking into consideration the trends, in a design perspective, architecture perspective, what would be for you the key competitive advantage to have in a couple of years when you design a hospitality project?
When we say key competitive advantage, obviously technology is beginning to play a very big part in the design of our hotels. People obviously now expect certain things. Everyone carries their iPad around, their telephones. They expect to be able to communicate easily. The provision of, let's say, business corners within the hotel. People can actually do their business from the hotel. The reception spaces now have become almost a mix of work and play spaces. They're hotels where people go and meet, have small functions. They expect to have the technology along there with them. One of the key things, though, is that I think developers really need to understand. I mean, they've got very many brands under their umbrella now. Most developers aren't aware of perhaps the differences in these brands. These brands are focused to particular segments of the market. Most people just know the umbrella name of the company. I mean, for instance, people will hear of a Novotel. They have no idea that it belongs to an Accor group. Right now, people are not even fully aware that the Four Points now belongs to the Marriott umbrella. So I think it's important also for some of us at the forefront to start educating clients that they could get probably a better return on investment if they pay a lot more attention to the actual product that the brands have to offer. And if they take advice from the brands, because the brands have also done their own, they've done a lot of homework. We're talking of Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt. The brands have looked at secondary cities, places like Ibadan, because the brands themselves follow the development of the state, and they see what is happening in terms of overall development. New roads are being built. So they've done their own studies, and they appreciate that, yes, if I put this particular type of brand and so on, in Ibadan, for instance, it would be quite a successful, potentially a successful, but unfortunately, too many developers themselves may not want to hear, I own a loft hotel. They want to hear that I own a Marriott hotel. So I think it's important to determine, do you want to make money from the project? Or is it just an ego trip? I think more and more in today's world, people are realizing that there's got to be a return on investment. So I think the brands are doing very well, to be quite honest, in educating people. I think there's far more awareness, but technology developments are going on all the time. So we're finding that in the design, we really are looking at even things like environmental issues. The brands are certainly pushing environmental relevance in the design of the products.
So the understanding of the market is key. The paying attention to the design is important and will contribute to a much better sustainable competitive advantage. And at the end of the journey, you will get a better return on investment. And it will also promote the image of the overall investment in the industry.
Yeah, sorry, one additional thing is that a lot of people in Nigeria, you know, we're do-it-yourselfers. A lot of people have built from a range of perhaps a sort of little 12-room conversion of a house to some very major developments which they built without operators. But you mentioned competitive advantage. I think now people are beginning to realize we're moving into a very competitive era. There are a lot more hotels being built. If you build your 50-key hotel and don't do it right, someone may build, you know, a 30-key hotel next to you, and he has a brand and he's done it right. And so those hotels are appreciating now they need to find brands. They need to find someone who's going to manage the hotel. It's no longer give it to my wife or cousin to manage. So I suspect that in the next few years we'll see a lot more branded hotels throughout the country than we have right now.
And sorry, I also wanted to add, as you mentioned in your statistics, more than half of the hotel inventory in Nigeria is unbranded. As the markets do get more competitive, what we're seeing is the opportunity for conversions. So converting existing hotels into branded hotels. And we have 30 brands, some of which are soft brands. So if you want to keep your identity, your name, you know, kind of the ethos you built this hotel with, we can find a soft collection. We have a luxury collection at the high end. We have an autograph collection for a more mid-size boutique style hotel. We have a tribute collection for a smaller property. So those are avenues we can work with existing hotel owners to, you know, kind of allow them to plug into our distribution networks to get the benefits of loyalty points for their guests, and also to, you know, to get the backing of a hotel brand. So that's an area that we're also trying to see, depending on what's been built, if we can grow in markets that already have existing hotels that are performing well enough for us to look into.
Maybe a last question for you, Olger, is what would be the key competitive advantage for you as a developer, as a residential developer, and linking it to the hospitality industry? What would be the key future competitive advantage for your development in the future?
In the sense how we differentiate ourselves from a branded property, I think you would need to look at it from the two sides, from the side of the owner of the properties, and on the side of the resident, of the client. A non-branded property allows individuals to invest. And as I stated very early on, this is a very important segment of our client base. We offer investment opportunities to individuals. So there we are quite different from the type of developers and owners that we've spoken of before. Our ticket prices are starting at $70,000, and this price is actually going to be reduced in the future. So they would have the opportunity possibly to invest into some sort of timeshare or buy a share of a hotel, like it is offered frequently, for example, in the Middle East. But this is not the type of investment that a lot of people in Ghana are looking for. They want to have the individual property that is titled, that is theirs, that they can inherit to their children, but until then create revenue from it. So there we are offering something that a Marriott would not be able to offer, or that the standard developer for a hotel property would not be able to offer. And for the tenant, I would say it is the price point. Airbnb undercuts the rates in a branded hotel usually by 30 to 40%, sometimes more. And it is exactly that what drives people to Airbnb. And so this is where the traffic comes from, that then creates the revenue for our clients, that then are able to buy a property in the next investment that we're putting in the market, and the next and the next. We're seeing a lot of repeat investors, which shows that this kind of business model works for them in the first place, and that makes it work for us as well. Okay. I hope that answered your question.
Maybe a last question is regarding the branded residences. What do you think about that type of product, and do you think it would fit the market, and it will be something interesting to do in the future for your company? Yeah.
I certainly think this is a field that is very interesting, that is worth exploring. For it allows to eliminate one risk that both the owners and the residents face with an individual and with a private stay. You never know really what you get until you open the front door, and that is a certain discomfort for the people that are renting with Airbnb. But if you have a branded residence, then you know the type of where you're going. And I would need to look closer into what are the operating models for these kind of branded residences, branded serviced apartments. But I can imagine that it works very well if it allows the individual ownership, because this is a big demand in West Africa. And Dipo, when in the beginning you were mentioning the difficulties of raising finance for developers, that is for the big projects. There is a huge amount of money in individual bank accounts that is waiting for the right investment opportunity. A double-digit return will mobilize this money, will allow people to put this to a much better use than they could ever by putting it into a bank account. And I think If you can combine the branded residence with individual ownership, I think that is a winning proposition for West Africa.
I would like to turn to the audience and see if anyone has any questions to our expert panelists.
Hello. Okay, my name is Tayo Shunaga from Haven Homes. I have a question for Holger. It was quite interesting the way you made the connection between a residential developer to hospitality by connecting with Airbnb. My question is, how do you manage the conflict between owners, resident owners, and operators of the B&B? Because I've attended a few estate management meetings where Airbnb is being frowned upon by the residents. And the reason is because they mention things like security. Take an owner who is living beside another apartment that's being used for Airbnb. The turnover tends to be a bit of annoyance from my understanding. So I just want to ask you, from your experience, if you've come across this conflict and how is it being managed?
Thank you very much, Mr. Schoneger. I think you've hit the problem on the head. You've identified one of the and probably the main issues around this renting out in a residential development. It is a conflict, obviously. As a long-term resident or as an owner, you want to know your neighbors, and you don't want to have a different face every other day. The kind of traffic that they create, it's uncomfortable. But at the same time, you might yourself may be in the situation that at some point in time you need to rent out your apartment, and the bylaws of there are developments where the bylaws, residential projects where the bylaws limit the minimum stay of a tenant to 3 months to cut out the short lets. That does not work for many. First of all, people hate bylaws anyway, which is the reason why they ignore them most of the time. And then people know that potentially they will be in the situation that they need to rent out their property, and then they don't want to have any limitations. So what we, rather than relying on bylaws, are doing is that we are trying to separate the properties that are rather for buy-to-let investors, and you can already predict from the size of the property, the size of the apartment, whether this will be rather a short-let proposition, that is the smaller units, or a long-term let for the larger units. So we try to separate those. Because we do multi-story developments a lot of times by staggering it. Lower floors, short let, higher floors, long lets, stroke buy to live. The other part of the equation is we also need to look at how the whole development is managed. We are heavy on security and we are heavy on facility management. Yes, because the impact of the Airbnb crowd on a development is quite significant, and you can only make sure that you have working access control and security knows exactly what their job is and are doing their job, and you need to have facility managers that clean up after the pool party, or rather keep the pool party from happening in the first place. I hope that answers your question.
Anyone more questions?
Good morning. My name is Abimbola Obumbi. I'm an architect and project manager. I've noticed that there are some hotels that you get there today, they're a particular brand, and then next year they're another brand, and then you come again a few years down the line, they're another brand. I don't know what informs the decision to choose brand A rather than brand B. We're doing a hotel in Ibadan presently, and we're almost on the first floor of an 8-story building. A client is still finding it difficult to choose a brand. I believe there's not enough information about the different brands that are and what the advantages are of choosing brand A rather than brand B. So a few years down the line, after having chosen a brand, you realize that it's not working for the market and you have to choose another brand. How can that be prevented? Thank you.
So I'll go back again to saying that it's about proper education on what you're getting into, because at the point where you sign a franchise or a management agreement, it's typically 15, 25 years. So if you decide at some point within that period that the terms don't work for you, there's usually a cost to breaking that agreement, which ends up being expensive for the owner. So in terms of getting into an agreement, it's proper education, knowing the terms, getting your lawyer to read through the terms very extensively so you know how this brand is going to operate your hotel if they're operating it, or what the terms are if it's a franchise. It's knowing what you're getting into. In terms of getting enough information to the brands and what they offer, it's speaking to me, finding out what we can offer you, which brand we think works best for your project, and trusting us, because Marriott, I can speak for Marriott, we have almost 100 years experience in operating hospitality establishments. So trust that we know what we're doing, and we're also going to be working to maximize your profits at the end of the day. I don't know if that answers your question.
Can I come in there? One of the things, I'm glad about her question, because we've always felt that there is a lack of information available to developers here. It's a discussion that's been going on for a number of years. Someone wants to do a hotel. First place they might go is they go see their banker. There needs to be someone or some people who can hold their hands, give them advice, what the process is. Choosing a brand. Most people have heard of perhaps 4 to 5 very well-known brands, but there are, of course, a whole host of others who might be more suitable for your 30-key or your 50-key hotel. There are brands who will not accept to manage very small hotels. You might do well to really do some investigation into consultants who might be able to advise you on this. It's going to be a major investment, whichever way you look at it. It's worth making the effort to find out. Don't just say, okay, I want a Radisson because my brother stayed in a Radisson in some place or the other and he liked it. It's not sufficient, because you might find that Marriott have a more suitable product for your location, for your size, etc., etc. So I would certainly advise people to do a bit of homework. There are advisory consultants in the hospitality space who can at least push you in the right direction. Okay.
So basically, you need to. Owners are not don't have hospitality background all the time. So you need to have the right experts surrounding the project to make sure they do a market research and understand what are the inventory at the moment in the city or in the area, what is the demand from the market, and with that analysis, you will be able to identify the right brand for your project.
Everybody, my name is Paul Erubami, MD of Max Migold Limited. I have this question for Holger, I think. When you have multi-tenanted environments, you have, either mixed use or purely residential, and you have different. And you have different buyers buy units in this development. Many of them don't live or use their property. They rent it out. Some live in the space that they have bought for themselves, right? And then there's usually this conflict of interest, because what the owner, occupier, desires or wants is not the same as the aspirations or hopes or expectations of the tenant. There seem to be two different goals, and they live in the same space. This is further compounded sometimes by certain sales promises, during the sales process that are not accomplished upon receipt of the acquisition, as it were. And so you have issues between owners and developers, and issues various occupants, whether owner or tenants in that space. What strategies have you deployed to smoothen the operations and reduce hiccup? Because at some point, some people stop paying their service charges, delay in paying their rent and all kinds of issues because they feel they are not getting value for their investment or their rent or service charge.
Okay, thank you for that question. I think it ties nicely into the earlier question that was being asked very much in the same direction. So, yes, the conflicts are there, and we need to acknowledge them, and we need to manage them. As I mentioned, the first way of addressing this issue is by design, trying to separate the areas. We have large developments. If we do 400, 200, 300, 400 apartments, and ideally we are able to steer the buy-to-let investors in the one direction and the buy-to-live in the other. How do we do that? Via the size of the properties and possibly the features. The other part is certainly we have a component within the bylaws, even as we have to acknowledge they are difficult to enforce, and they need to be light, not to overburden both groups, the buy-to-live investors and the buy-to-let investors. Now, the third and very important part is, as I mentioned, the facility management, access control, security, that is key to preventing the conflicts or to mediating conflicts that exist between the guests that don't have a stake in the development, see it for what it is, an opportunity to enjoy the facilities that they can use at their discretion, and the owners that feel a sense of ownership, not just for the apartment but also for the common areas, and a lot of times have the thought of whatever happens here will affect my service charge. Because we take this role of facility management and security very serious and deploy them in their numbers, our service charge, as a consequence of having to manage these conflicts, is a little bit higher than possibly it is solely buy-to-live property would be.
One last question.
Hi, my name is Oman from Blue Mahogany Interior Design. I actually have two questions. The first one is for Holger and Dami. When I'm booking a hotel or an apartment, aside from price and location, the next biggest deciding factor for me is what does the space actually look like? So if I'm going to a place where I've experienced one of the brands, say a W or Marriott, etc., I know what to expect because of your brand standards, etc. I also like the thrill of the Airbnb, of experiencing something a bit more personal. I've been to the gallery in Accra that you manage. Now, my decision sometimes depends on how long I'm staying. So if I'm staying for a week, I want to go somewhere I know and trust. If it's a day, okay, I can risk it not looking like what it looked like on Booking.com. The question to you is, how much, in your experience, how much does the interior design of your properties affect your occupancy rates and ultimately your profitability, your bottom line? The second question is to Dipo. As a designer and an architect yourself, you mentioned earlier that in when you've designed 9 or 10 spaces, only 1 or 2 of them actually get built. I've had the same sort of experience working on hotel projects as well. Have you found, and do you think there's room for possibly designers or contractors, service providers actually getting involved in funding, maybe not necessarily funding projects, but reaching out to their networks to make sure that the projects we design actually get built?
So in terms of interior design, it's very important for us, for the brands and for the properties to fully embody the ethos of that brand. Our portfolio in West Africa, I will admit, a lot of it is very much inherited from our Starwood acquisition. So the Sheratons, the 4 Points, Protea was a different acquisition. A lot of those we're trying to see how much we can do in terms of renovating and refurbishing those properties. But new build Marriotts that we're currently working on that are in the pipeline, interior design, architectural design is very important to us. And we have a separate design and construction team that has a very hands-on approach to the process. So they're reviewing plans, they're giving assessments, they're giving comments and feedback to the owners, interior or architectural designers. And we're also doing a bit of project management to make sure everything is being done according to our standards, according to the quality that we want, that we've defined for those brands. And then things that you don't see when you walk into the room, the fire and life safety, the MEP, the technological wirings of the hotel. That's a very key part of the development process for us, and one that we don't compromise on. So sometimes you hear, oh, Marriott, they're so rigid. That's why. It's because it has to feel like you're anywhere in the world, whether you're in Lagos or Hong Kong or New York, you have to feel like the product fully embodies what you expect when you walk into that door. So for us, it's very important, for sure, in the process.
Maybe Dipo, you want to touch base quickly on you want to?
I don't know, because you mentioned the gallery, whether you wanted me to chip in there. But there's I must honestly tell you, we at Clifton suffer sometimes from the meticulous attention to detail that our boss has to the look and feel of our projects. And that extends into the apartment. Even if we don't own them, a lot of them we furnish. And each one of those items that you see in an apartment that we furnish is chosen by our CEO. This is how important the design and the look and feel of a property is, even for a residential developer who should actually have very much a hands-off approach when it comes to what's happening behind the front door of an apartment.
Okay, I'll just, in terms of architects, interior designers assisting in the process of getting financing for projects, I think that there is a need for a lot of creativity in the financing aspect. of hotels. I mean, I think he touched on the fact that there are opportunities to actually build hotels from an almost selling off chunks of the hotel. Either people invest in a room, for instance. I mean, I have even had proposals sent to me from Europe where they want me to invest in 10 rooms at a certain cost. Now, essentially what you're doing, it's like a timeshare investment. There are architects, engineers, interior designers who have an appetite to get involved in the development process and who want to play perhaps a developer role. Certainly they are perhaps in a better position because they're likely to be more savvy investors. They do realize that there needs to be an equity portion. So people will say, perhaps I will use part of my fee as an investment in the project. We've been approached quite a number of times to do that. Again, it's like a marriage. You need to know who your bedfellow is. Is it someone you can get on with? If the investor is I mean, we have a project in Ibadan. Okay, I happen to like Ibadan because I grew up there, so I have an emotional attachment. Do I want to invest in it? It's quite a good location. It's something that I think you take on a project-by-project basis. But certainly there needs to be more creativity in the financing aspect so we can get many more projects off the ground. Instead of people just saying, I want a 200-key hotel, it might be better for them to look at something smaller. I think there's a tendency for people to chew on a lot more than they can handle. There's no need. Even a 40-key hotel can pay huge dividends. I might just tell people that there's a project in Lagos which actually started off this hotel boom. I don't know if people remember a hotel called the Morehouse Sofitel. The Morehouse Sofitel, I think when it started was just 40 keys, or thereabouts. I have access to the numbers. The Morehouse was making a lot of money. I mean, as most of you will know, it was full most of the time. There are times you had to literally book in advance 3 months to even get a room there. It was just 40 keys. So there's no need to think that the only thing that can make sense to you is a 200-bed hotel. One of our clients now in Abuja has built himself almost 600 keys. He has no idea how he's going to manage it. He's trying to get operators now to look at it. No doubt there are issues that he'll have to contend with: fire and life safety, security. He has built himself, unfortunately, a whole stack of problems. If an operator comes on board now, he might say, you're going to need to do this, this, and this, and this, and his completion bill, instead of what he might think is 500 million, maybe 5 billion. And these are projects that unfortunately might stall on a permanent basis. So I think we need to look at creative ways of financing so that maybe we can up the numbers from 10% to perhaps 30, 40%. Yes, I think you're quite right. So we can discuss some opportunities.
I think